Good morning. Welcome back to the 2025 Reimagining and Improving Student Education Committee, or the RISE Committee, for Department of Education negotiated rulemaking. I'd like to start with roll call. If department staff could introduce themselves.
Tammy Abernathy, Federal Negotiator.
Jeff Andrade, Office of Post-Secondary Education.
Jake Lallo, Office of General Counsel.
And I'll go through the short name for the constituencies, and if everybody who is present could please say their name. Legal assistance organizations, consumer advocates, and civil rights groups that represent students, primary.
Ashley Nepperly.
Alternate.
Tamar Hoffman.
Student loan servicers, collection agencies, lenders, and guarantee agencies, primary.
Alex Ritchie.
Alternate.
Lori Hartung.
Organizations representing taxpayers and the public interest, primary.
Alex Holt.
Alternate.
Andrew Gillen.
Private nonprofit institutions, primary.
Jenna Colvin.
Alternate.
Patty Kohler.
Proprietary institutions, primary.
Andy Vaughn.
Alternate.
Jeffrey Bodemer.
Public institutions, primary.
Timothy King.
Alternate.
Matt Ellsworth.
State officials, primary.
Scott Kemp.
Alternate.
Bennett Boggs.
Student loan borrowers, primary.
Deborah Lilly.
Alternate.
Emeka Ogu.
Student loan borrowers who are veterans, U.S. military service members, or groups representing them, primary.
Vice Sullivan.
Alternate.
Bob Kerr will be here shortly.
Okay, thank you. And that is our group. We have a very busy day today, so I won't delay. I will turn it over to Tammy.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. We are happy to report we have made it through Friday, or made it to Friday. I want to be through Friday, but I guess we're just not quite there yet, but we're willing it to happen. Before I start with opening remarks, I know that I was approached by Alex, and I think I'll let Alex make a comment for us today. Alex Holt.
So I got some messages after the end of yesterday, so I just wanted to clarify for the record that I was wrong about the principal payment match. The Batman was right, obviously, and I would just say, for the department, I think colloquially it might make sense to just call this a payment match, because that's really what it is. When you pay, if you make an on-time payment, your balance never goes up and actually always goes down. So if you make a $10 payment, it will go down by at least $10. Make a $40 payment, it will go down by at least $40. It's a very generous benefit to low-income borrowers. And since I'm on a soapbox, I would also just like to, since I basically told the civil servant he was wrong and then have to say that I'm wrong, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of the civil servants in the room who are currently not being paid and working very, very hard.
Thank you for that. I know our very own Batman appreciates that. He is kind of awesome, isn't he? All right. So a couple things that we want to chat through before we dive in this morning. One of the things that we are going to ask you to do a little differently than you have been doing is to make sure when you email us hypothetical situations that you are giving us the hypothetical situation where it supports a problem in our regulatory language. We need that in writing, and we want to take that back and flesh it out. We're not going to flesh it out in real time because it takes a village sometimes to walk through the things that you're showing us we need to think through from our side. So we take these very seriously. For instance, the schedule of reductions yesterday. We know that you brought up several pieces and parts that we may not have considered in our regulatory text. So we are going to table that particular reg provision until the second time we meet to give us more time to flesh through some of those things. To that end, I have a couple of proposals or questions that you guys submitted around that, and then one again this morning, we will table those until we come back to the table to discuss it after we look at what you've asked us to take a look at and what our remedy for that particular situation may or may not be. We also request, because we're coming back in roughly a month, that you would submit any proposals for reg changes or things that you feel need to be addressed in our regulations that are in line with, of course, the statute, that you submit that information to us no later than the 10th, October 10th, not November 10th, which I keep trying to give you until November 10th to do that. It is October 10th. That will give us time to work through it as a department team. And if any changes need to happen, we can change it before we're required to give you the week's notice, the regs in advance of the negotiations. So if you could help us with that, that would be really, it would be very beneficial for the department to have that time to really make sure that if we are preparing a mandatory text or if we're not preparing a mandatory text, that we give you a very thorough reason why. So thank you for that. That's 2 things off my list already. We're making such great progress. We are going to go back through a couple of the provisions from yesterday to make sure that we can reevaluate and do another pulse check to see if we have shifted in any way from those that had either a thumbs down or a sideways. And so the first reg text provision we want to look at is 685-210. And I apologize to my team because this came to me after we had already gone over the schedule of how we were doing things today. So we need to give Linnea a couple minutes to get that pulled up because she was all ready to go with the schedule. And here I am changing things already on her. 685-210, it would be the choice of repayment plan. So 210, 685, 211, 219, 220, 221, that paper. There we go. It's up on the screen. So I know there was some consternation about made and dispersed. So I would just like for us to go forward and do another pulse check on that, Anne Marie.
So doing a pulse check of 685-210 choice of repayment plan. If I could see thumbs. Okay, let's pause for a minute so everybody can find it. If you're looking at the discussion draft that was circulated, it's called Miscellaneous Loan Repayment Provisions and Public Service Loan Forgiveness, Regulatory Section 210.
And so I think the concern here was about made and dispersed, and we are addressing this with clarity in the NPRM, not in the regulatory language, because we are using the statutory language. And so what we will do is make sure that we clearly specify in the NPRM that this was a concern expressed by our committee, and the distinction here is made equals dispersed. So we hope that helps clarify.
Are we ready for the pulse check? Okay.
Yes, I'm ready. Oh, we're not. Oh, we're not ready. Okay. I thought she was waiting for me to say yes.
Now are we ready for the pulse check? It appears so. If I could see thumbs, please. I see all thumbs up for 685, 210. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could we go to 685, 219 in the same paper? This is the provision where we changed the date from June 29th to June 30th because we found out that if that a repeal date and an effective date could be the very same date. So we did not, and the statutory language it says the day before. And so we were able to change this to June 30th.
Are we ready for a pulse check? This is on 685, 219 Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. If I could see thumbs, please. And I see all thumbs up.
If we could move to 685, 220 consolidation, same paper.
Are we ready for the pulse check? This is on 685, 220 consolidation. If I could see thumbs, please. I see all thumbs up.
Well, aren't we starting off really strong today? I like it. All right, I think that is all on that particular provision. If we would now move to 682, 405.
We have a comment first from Ashley.
Tammy, it would be helpful if when you reference certain sections, if you could say what the title of the discussion paper is and or the page number, just that would help us get there faster. At least me, because I'm just apparently a little slow.
Okay, this is the loan deferment, forbearance, and rehabilitation provisions. And just so you know, for the next session, we are just gonna have reg text and numbered. So we'll say number one, it just, reg text number one, reg text number two, all 16 provisions, so we won't have a lot of excess stuff. Now that we've talked about all of this, we can streamline it a little better for next time. And it is, I guess, my page number. I don't know if it's your page number, but my page number is 2. It's the second provision on that paper, if that helps. So you'd like to circle back to discuss, Tamara had a thumbs down and Alex had a sideways thumb. And what we've tried to do here is we've gone back and fleshed out about automatic certification after default and all of the different things around that. And we feel like we will be better able to address this in the preamble than to actually create reg text around it because it's not something that the statute speaks to. And we feel like the best way to do this is to discuss it through the preamble very carefully and thoroughly.
Jenna?
So just a housekeeping question, there's no change, right? No highlights, no change. What we're looking at is what we're pulse checking on.
Yes, ma'am. All the edits are in there. Yeah, we've made no changes from the last time we did our pulse check on this. It's just the fact that we wanted to revisit it to let them know that our response to what their concerns were will be addressed in our preamble language. Yes, ma'am.
Alex Holt?
So just a clarification question. I don't have a dog in this particular fight, but when you say it's going to be addressed in the preamble, clarification, do we vote on the preamble? No. Okay.
Yeah. So the issue here was doing more on a rehab when a loan was rehab to encourage um, borrowers to go into income-based repayment, which we agree with. The issue is the issue that was put on the table was whether we could do that automatically, and the problem is it requires too much too many consents from the individual. They have to opt in, and so we need documentation. So we can't automatically put people in, but we get the spirit of what's trying to be done here, and so we're looking at our own procedures when we do rehab alone on on what we can do to encourage borrowers to go into income-based repayment. So that's the commitment. So we can't do it in the language. Definitely agree, I think, with the proposal, and that there needs to be more done, because otherwise we wouldn't have an option for second rehabs if first rehabs were successful. So that's what we're committed to.
Ashley? You can. Scott?
Yeah, and just a quick clarification, is the language in the preamble legally binding? So in other words, if the borrower disagreed with the provision or how it was addressed in the provision and wanted to address, or does the preamble just provide clarification, or is
So again, the suggestion was, could we put borrowers automatically in? We cannot put borrowers automatically in, but rather than dismiss it outright, again, we agree with the spirit. So we would describe steps that the secretary would be taking to encourage borrowers to enter income-based repayment, but we cannot do that without the borrower's consent. And we cannot do that without getting the information that we need for federal tax information purposes.
Jacob, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, just to further answer that, it's different than a regulation. That there's still some legal effect to it, but it's not binding in the same way. That being said, it's a general statement of policy, and it echoes our general commitment to attempting to achieve this for borrowers. But to put it in the regs would make the regs very clunky, complicated, and it would really tie our hands into doing something a very specific way that is very complicated to do operationally. So we need to preserve the fluidity with the current structure. But it's something that we're very committed to looking at, and we will explain what we can and can't do in the preamble to that effect.
Ashley?
Thanks. Thank you for that explanation. Are there other regulatory provisions that call for auto enrollment in IDR?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, those provisions are under the save and repay regulations, which are enjoined right now.
Understood. And joined because they're wrapped up in litigation, not because those particular provisions were challenged. Just because the state plan itself was.
No, it's wrapped up in litigation.
If they challenge the whole plan, it inherently challenges the provisions
They
implemented.
they challenged the whole rule. So the whole rule, because other pieces and parts, as we went through the save, it's called the save rule, but we had done a number of things in that save rule, restructuring regulations, moving things for clarity, defining family size, putting in not only changing repay to save, we did a number of activities. Everything related to that rule is enjoined. It is under litigation, as well as pulling in the forgiveness pieces with repay. So there is nothing that we can really do about that at the moment.
I like to call a caucus.
Okay, can you tell me who you would like to have in your caucus?
All negotiators.
All negotiators, primary and alternate. Would you like the department there?
Yes, please.
I'd like to make one comment before that caucus. The spirit of these negotiations are about the bill. OBBB, the statutory changes that were made because of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. These negotiations are about the regulatory text changes related to that and not any other regulatory provisions other than the ones mentioned here. The save and repay are joined in litigation and they are off the table for these negotiations. There will most likely, I don't know if or when, another negotiation around that is what my understanding is. But at this point, that is not on the table for today.
Ashley, how long would you anticipate needing for your caucus?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. We would need the public then to step outside and to stop the live stream. Welcome back from our caucus. If I could ask Ashley to please give a report out on the caucus.
Sure. All of the negotiators, met to discuss possible changes, regulatory changes, and sub-regulatory changes to rehabilitation, specifically as to whether or not borrowers would be able to opt in or opt out of auto enrollment into IDR upon successful completion of rehabilitation. And they are taking that under advisement. So we will discuss at the next session.
Back to you, Tammy.
I just want to clarify that the regulatory provisions that we will be taking back to review are 682-405 and 685-405. Right? Yes. Okay. Before we move into our loan limits paper, which is the 201, 102, 201, 203, I'll let you guys get there. I just want to mention that the department, we heard you yesterday. We appreciate the really helpful conversation around the schedule of reductions. And we are going to take that particular piece back for the second session. We would like to flesh out additional, perhaps changes, amendments, or additional language to go into that regulatory provision, which would account for some of the scenarios that you presented during our discussion. So we will not be taking a pulse check on section 203. We will take it on the other provisions, except for the provision of professional degree. I know that our undersecretary met with us earlier in the week and he presented a solution for you all to consider. And we really have not had a chance or an opportunity to get your feedback on that. And we would like some feedback. The undersecretary would really like the feedback on the whole for that. And I don't know if you have any of that information that you would like to share now, or you want to do that in writing. But he is looking for some feedback related to that. And so we kind of will do a temperature check on the professional student definition. And then we'll recirculate this next month. The other provision with the loan limits that we talked about were the health professions loans. And right now, the bill did not provide separate limits. So we are looking at this for the second session. We will have to look at them in conjunction with each other. So another reason why we're not going to take a pulse check on 685-203 loan limits, but we will discuss some of the provisions in there.
First, we have Scott, then we have Alex Holt, then Andy, then Jenna and Ashley.
Oh
So
my.
we've got a lot coming up. We'll start there with Scott.
Mine's easy. State officials would like to switch places.
So we have Bennett Boggs coming to the table for the state constituency. If we can go next then to Alex Holt.
I'm actually going to yield to the back of the line.
We'll go next to Andy.
Clarification, and then got a host of questions. So first of all, the designated health programs, you said we would not learn that today. I might be conflating topics for the answer from the OMB.
I said we were taking that back, that the OBBB did not provide separate, it did not separate this out. And so we have to look at this in conjunction, and we'll be bringing it back the second session.
Okay, so OMB, earlier in the week, we were told OMB would answer that question, but there's
I
more
think-
work to be done.
I think we said we were confer with OMB, and then in Tammy's answer, essentially we're looking at and at that in conjunction with the professional student definition. And so there's budgetary analysis and there's legal analysis that still needs to be done further on it.
Okay. So in the language proposed by the undersecretary, is it possible over the next 4 weeks during our break before we meet again to check the legal authority to do so? I know there's concerns about if we close out and let's just say we come to consensus a month from now, and this language is a part of that consensus, it feels as though not external litigation, but rather OMB comes back and says, well, nice try, department, but no, you can't do that. You overstepped. You can't do that. And we get back. And by then, we're kind of shut out of negotiations. Is it possible to get further guidance through the chain on the proposed? I don't want to call it a delay, but that 1 year interim period is probably a better term, that this wouldn't get held up somewhere by the federal teams and just get shut out in the final rule.
While there is a formal OMB review of a notice and proposed rulemaking and final regulations, we are working with them very closely in the development of these draft regulations as well. And we'll be working with them. So that's not our expectation that there'll be a change in policy between what we're dealing with at the table and the final reviews, because it's generally going to be the same folks in the room. So it's our expectation that what we come with, not making any promises for any other agency in case a new issue comes up, but essentially we're joined at the hip through the development of these processes.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add a little further clarification, with this, as well as with any rule that we give you, the royal we, both OMB, OGC, and our partners within policy, do a comprehensive legal review of our authority throughout the process. So we will continue to look at it and make sure that the language is compliant and that we can do what we offer to you. And we'll communicate any changes as we go.
Jenna?
Thank you. I understand you're taking it back. I'm sorry, I'm not following. Is the operating assumption that because OB3 didn't reference the other statutory authorizing language that it exists? Or is the operating assumption that because OB3 is later in time, it supersedes?
Right now, we're looking at them in conjunction to one another.
Meaning it's how they relate to each other?
Correct, which would assume that we're looking at both authorities.
Ashley?
I just wanted to mention that we, as in me and Tamara and Faisal submitted a proposal on October 1st with regard to institutionally determined loan limits. And I'm not sure if that was reviewed already, or I just wanted to point that out just to make sure that it wasn't inadvertently missed.
I'm sorry, I do not have that. Um, what was the exact? I have the ones that were, the ones that were submitted yesterday? Is that what you said yesterday?
No,
That October 1st?
October 1st, yeah, so I guess.
Isn't October 1st Wednesday? Okay. Hold on just a second. I am looking to
Okay.
make sure, because we do have a couple that we're trying to,
I'm happy to resend too, no.
no, I'm sure they have it. I just don't have it. And it's possible that they gave it to me and it got shuffled in. Imagine. Give us just a second to look for it, please. Thank you. While they're doing that, I will talk about the ones that we received. Ashley, tell us the subject again.
It has to do with institutionally determined loan limits. And it has, it's a memorandum, so it has some context and then some suggested regulatory text. We're amending 685-203. M2.
I have one for rehab, but I don't have one for that.
I'm sorry?
So. Is this one? No, it's not this one. I don't have it.
Of the email? Oh, okay. I don't have the email up. I can look for it. Mm-mm.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to take this back at lunch. I apologize. This did not get, it may have gotten to us and we may not have just seen it. I don't have it in my stack and I keep them all and it's not in my stack. So I apologize for that. We'll huddle at lunch and come back. If somebody from my team could get us copies for that for lunch, that would be great.
And
Or-
just for the clarification for the other negotiators, the subject line of the email is proposal institutionally determined loan limits on October 1st. It was distributed to everyone as well.
Thank you for bringing that up. We take these very seriously, so I apologize. Mm-mm. Okay, well, again, we apologize, but we'll remedy it. Okay. All right, give me just a second to get my bearings about me now. All right, so
Tammy, we have two cards still up. Alex Holt.
Thank you. So two things. First of all, I wanted to bring up that the organization, my constituency has been able to take a further look at the latest, the proposed language from whenever that was. It's hard to keep track. Probably Wednesday. And we have some pretty significant concerns related to the costs of even extending this for 1 year. Because of the way the definition is written, not the definition, the exception basically is written. We realistically believe that a very significant portion of graduate programs that Congress really was intending to limit from getting the loans would get them, And unfortunately, these programs have very high costs and are frequently associated with professions that get PSLF, and so that interaction is very expensive, and so we have some concerns about that. The second thing is I would like to call for a 10-minute caucus um, with all negotiators and alternates, including the department.
So that's a caucus request from Alex Holt, all negotiators, including the department. So I would then ask the public to please step outside for at least 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for your time in the caucus negotiators. If Alex Holt could please do a report out on the caucus, I would appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. We mainly discussed some concerns related to like legal questions related to how this law works, and for the public, it's a little difficult because of the shutdown. But there was a proposal submitted by me and my alternate for an alternative language for this definition, and that was also discussed.
So we don't have enough time before break to go through and do pulse checks on everything other than the professional student definition, because we've heard enough on that one. So I'm going to just take a minute to reference the proposals that we received and the reminder. Thank you, Tamar, for reminding me what I needed for us to take a look at. I appreciate that. We're going to just kind of go through these quickly and let you know where we stand with the ones that were submitted. It looks like, Ashley and Tamara, we received that, but for some reason, I don't have a record. The one that you referenced earlier, it apparently got to me at some point, but it didn't get to me and I can't find it. So again, we apologize for that, but we did receive it and these two remember talking about it. I'm not sure where I was. Um, I can't really respond to that, but we did get that. So I don't want you to think that we lost anything. I want to go on the official record as it, we did receive it. I just apologize for not having it on the list. We received from Tamar 682 215 E6. We wanted to let you know, I'm not sure we used everything that you submitted as a change to the amendatory text, but we did fix this as we go through that reg text a little bit later. You'll see that change in there. Jenna and Tamar, well, Tamar was just giving me the transfer thing, and I think Scott submitted some hypothetical proposals. The schedule, like I've said before, the schedule of reductions is going to be taken back and tweaked based on this. So we're not really going to go over what you submitted, but we did receive them and we did talk about them, which is why we're going back and taking a look at some things and trying to clean that up and tighten it up a little bit. So we appreciate your patience while we do that, but it's definitely worthwhile because that's exactly what we needed to see. And now we'll go back to the drawing table. Thank you. I believe that concludes all of the old business for things. And I think we could go ahead and take a break and then we could come back and hit the rest of the things that we need to do.
Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break, be back at 10:35. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for returning promptly from the break. I do believe we have one constituency that is going to swap from alternate back to primary.
Yes, thank you. Let's swap out Scott Kemp and Bennett Boggs.
And I'll turn it back over to you, Tammy, to announce the next section.
So what I would like to do is in 685-102, not going through the professional student. We've done that already. We're not going to take a pulse check on that. But the other proposed changes that we have here in red line, so if we could get 685-102 up on the screen. That is in, oh goodness, that is in the loan limits discussion draft. So I will read, while you are getting there, I will read the text. It is up on the screen as well. Expected time to credential from July 1, 2026. The expected time for a student to complete a program that is equal to or the lesser of 3 academic years or its equivalent, or the period determined by calculating the difference between. Romanet 1, the program length for the program of study in which the individual is enrolled, and Romanet 2, the period of such program of study that such individual has completed as of the date of the determination under paragraph 2 of this definition. And then graduate student, a student enrolled in a program of study that is above the baccalaureate level and awards a graduate credential other than a professional degree upon completion of the program. And then program length, the minimum amount of time in weeks, months, or years that is specified in the catalog, marketing materials, or other official publications of an institution for a full-time student to complete the requirements for a specific program of study. If we could do a pulse check on everything except for the professional student, just the stuff that I read.
So a pulse check on just that content in 685-102.
I have a comment first.
Okay, comment first from
Question.
Andy.
Can we go back down to the bottom on the last red line? Is there any concern from the taxpayer group or the department about that being open-ended? Meaning, could a school go into their catalog now and change that to have more time than they've had in the past? Should there be a date certain on that? Is there any concern about that being open-ended?
We're talking about the part of the definition on professional loan limits.
Yes, so it says basically, we're gonna point to program length for the minimum amount of time as published in your catalog, marketing materials, or other publications. Should that, throughout the proposals in red line, there's always a kind of a date certain, as of date. This one doesn't have that. But could a school go in and manipulate that and open a door is what I'm.
But just to clarify, this is related to the professional degree definition? No, this is not.
Time to completion, for,
Oh,
would this relate back to the legacy student?
So far as the legacy students are concerned, with the expected time to credential language that's baked in there, it is fixed to a time certain of 3 years for expected time to credential.
Correct.
For the overall program length, I think I understand your concern here, I think. But because we're capping with the lifetime limit, I mean, while you could certainly play with the program length, I mean, your point is well taken, but it runs into a problem of like,
It's just a general definition, not to be read anything more into it. It's just the general definition that we have here, along with, just kind of setting the stage for the pieces that need to be defined in the regulatory language.
Alex Holt and then Jenna.
Is referenced under expected time to credential. So if you look and you see from July 1, 2026, the expected time for the student to complete the program. So
which
if
for
that helps.
clarity is 3 years.
So, reserving the right to change my mind later, but, I would say from the taxpayer and public interest, and more, also the public interest plays into this here. Um, because of that cutoff date, we just aren't that worried about that kind of a thing. We wanna try to make this as we're concerned a little bit about the difficulty operationally, both for the department and for schools in this transition period. So, and we don't think this just never will rise to a cost that is super relevant for us. So we just don't want to be too nitpicky on it.
Okay, I see a couple of cards still up. I think they were up from before, Tammy and Alex. Now are we ready for the pulse check on this section, again excluding the professional student definition? If I can see thumbs, please. All thumbs are up. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate that. 685, 200 borrower eligibility. Paragraph 1, a graduate student or professional student is eligible to receive a direct plus loan if the student meets the following requirements. We re-enumerate Romanet 1, Romanet 2, Romanet 3, Romanet 4, Romanet 5. We add paragraph 2, Romanet 1. Beginning on July 1, 2026, a graduate student or professional student may not borrow a direct plus loan. Romanet 2, the limitation for making a new federal direct plus loan awards described in paragraph B to Romanet 1 of this section shall not be applicable to student borrowers during the period of the student's expected time to credential if the student, A, is enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and B, received a direct loan for such program of study prior to July 1, 2026. Paragraph 3, if the student withdraws in accordance with 668.22 or otherwise ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point after receiving the exception under paragraph B to Romanet 2 of this section, the limitations under paragraph B to Romanet 1 shall apply. If we have either comments or a pulse check, please.
There was a request for a scroll down on for what's on the screen to go a little lower down that people can see.
I just want to say thanks for the cleanup on ceases to be enrolled. I think it's a lot more precise now.
Faisal?
Just have a question about some of the student veteran military related provisions that we mentioned earlier in the week. I know we haven't seen them yet, but you guys mentioned that they will be, we will see them. Where exactly, not where are they, but like,
Well,
where did they exactly fit into this scheme?
so again, we're just doing a pulse check on what we have. We know that that is a piece, and it was my understanding that one of the department officials was working with Bob on some language. And so I don't know where that is. That individual is not in the room at the moment, so I can't find out any more additional information on that. When we have language around that, though, that would be presented during the second session. I don't know where it's going to go yet, but we will make sure it's in the right spot. And it is my understanding that they have heard and seen the proposals that have come in and they are working on it.
Tammy, I see no other cards. If you could clarify the sections that you want the pulse check on.
$685, $200. The whole thing that's on the the discussion draft that's on there, what I just went over is in 685-200 borrower eligibility.
Pulse check on 685-200 borrower eligibility. If I can see thumbs, please. So I see thumbs up from all except Deborah and Faisal and Ashley with thumbs in the middle. Faisal,
I just want on the record, we expect to be in agreement, but we're just putting that just for now as a placeholder.
Absolutely. We get it. Thank you. Deborah,
Just for the record, student borrowers expect the same. We concur with Faisal.
We also want to see the proposed language as well incorporated into this and may have a couple of other concerns, but for now, we expect to be in agreement.
should you have additional concerns, if you could get those to us so that we could take a look at those too, that would be great. Thank you. 685-201, obtaining a loan. We have revised subsection B to Romanet 2 to read as follows. On or after July 1, 2026, a graduate student or professional student may only apply for a direct plus loan if the student satisfies the conditions set forth in section 685-200B2 Romanet 2. That is all that is on this provision. So if you all want to make comments on that or just take a pulse check, we're good.
I see no cards, so we'll do a pulse check on 685-201, obtaining a loan. If I can see thumbs, please. And I see all thumbs up.
Okay, we're going to go over loan limits. We'll take a pulse check on the things that are not with things that we're not still evaluating. We won't even discuss those, but I do want to know where we land on the rest of the stuff. That's okay. So we're revising subsection B2, Romanet 3. We've added an ending honor before June 30th, 2026. We've added Romanet 4, loan limits for graduate and professional students for periods of enrollment beginning on or after July 1, 2026. Paragraph A1, notwithstanding paragraph 1 of this section, a graduate student who is not a professional student for a period of enrollment beginning on or after July 1, 2026 may borrow up to $20,500 for an academic year under the direct unsubsidized loan program. Notwithstanding paragraph 1 of this section, a professional student for a period of enrollment beginning on or after July 1, 2026 may borrow up to $50,000 for any academic year under the direct unsubsidized loan program. Paragraph B, the limitations in effect on July 1, 2026 for annual loan limits as described in paragraph B2, Romanet 4, paragraph A of this section shall not be applicable to student borrowers during the period of the student's expected time to credential if the student 1 is enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and received a direct loan prior to July 1, 2026 for such program of study. Paragraph C, if the student withdraws in accordance with 668.22 or otherwise ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point after receiving the exception under paragraph B2, Romanet 4, capital B of this section, the limitations under paragraph B2, Romanet 4, capital A shall apply. Oh, I'm sorry, there's more. Excuse me. C2, we have added for a period of enrollment through June 30th, 2026. We've revised subsection E to read as follows. We've added to paragraph 3, enrolled before July 1, 2026. We've added paragraph 4, notwithstanding paragraph 1 of this section, beginning on July 1, 2026 for a graduate student enrolled on or after July 1, 2026, who is not and has never been a professional student, $100,000. Who is a professional, who has who is or has been a professional student, $200,000 minus any amounts such student borrowed as a graduate student. 5, notwithstanding paragraph L, I think that's an L of this section, beginning on July 1, 2026, for a professional student, $200,000 minus any direct subsidized loan, subsidized federal Stafford loan, and federal SLS, which is a supplemental loan for undergraduate students, program loan amounts, and any amounts such student borrowed as a graduate student if applicable. Paragraph 6, the limitations for aggregate loan limits described in paragraphs E4 and E5 of this section shall not be applicable to the student borrowers during the period of the student's expected time to credential if the student Romanet 1 is enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and Romanet 2 received a direct loan for such program of study prior to July 1, 2026. Paragraph 7, if the student withdraws in accordance with 668.22 or otherwise ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point after receiving the exception under paragraph E6 of this section, the limitations and under paragraphs E4 or E5 shall apply as applicable. Subsection F to be revised, adding annual loan limits before July 1, 2026 to paragraph 1 and after the word study before July 1, 2026, comma, before the word may. 2, annual limits on or after July 1, 2026. Beginning on July 1, 2026, the total amount of direct plus loans that all parents may borrow on behalf of each dependent student for any academic year of study may not exceed 20,000 minus other financial assistance as defined in section 480I of the Act for the Student. Romanet 2, the limitation for annual loan limits described in paragraph F2 Romanet 1 of this section shall not be applicable to parent borrowers who borrowed a loan on behalf of a dependent student during the period of student's expected time to credential if the student is enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and paragraph B, the parent borrower received a direct loan for such program of study on behalf of the dependent student or the dependent student received a direct loan for such program of study. Romanet 3, if the student withdraws in accordance with 668.22 or otherwise ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point after receiving the exception under paragraph F2 Romanet 2 of this section, the limitations under paragraph F2 Romanet 1 of this section shall apply to the parent borrower of that dependent student. Subsection G, we've added in paragraph 1 aggregate limits before July 1, 2026, and after the word borrower and before the word for, we've added before July 1, 2026. Paragraph 2, we've added aggregate limits on or after July 1, 2026. Beginning on July 1, 2026, the total amount of all direct plus loans that all parents may borrow on behalf of each dependent student for enrollment in an eligible program of study may not exceed $65,000 for the entire period of enrollment without regard to any amounts repaid, forgiven, canceled, or otherwise discharged on any such loan. Any amount of loan funds that have been returned by the institution or the borrower will not count against the aggregate loan limit under this paragraph G2. Paragraph 3, the limitation for aggregate loan limits described in paragraph G2 of this section shall not be applicable to parent borrowers during the period of the student's expected time to credential if, Romanet 1, the student is enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and Romanet 2, the parent received a direct plus loan for such program of study on behalf of the dependent student or the dependent student received a direct loan for such program of study prior to July 1, 2026. Paragraph 4, if the student withdraws in accordance with section 668.22 or otherwise ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point after receiving the exception under paragraph G3 of this section, the limitations under paragraph G2 of this section shall apply. Subsection J, we've added a 1, we've re-enumerated Romanet 1 and Romanet 2, added paragraph 2. Effective July 1, 2026, the lifetime maximum aggregate amounts of the loans made, insured, or guaranteed under the Act that a student may borrow, excluding federal plus loans or federal direct plus loans, shall be $257,500 without regard to any amounts repaid, forgiven, canceled, or otherwise discharged on such loans. Any amount of loan funds that have been returned by the institution or the borrower will not count against the lifetime maximum aggregate loan limit in this paragraph J2. The limitation for lifetime maximum aggregate loan limits described in paragraph J2 of this section shall not be applicable to student borrowers during the period of the student's expected time to credential if the student, Romanet 1, is enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and received a direct loan for such program of study prior to July 1, 2026. Paragraph 4. If the student withdraws in accordance with Section 668.22 or otherwise ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point after receiving the exception under paragraph J3 of this section, the limitations under paragraph J2 of this section shall apply. We've revised subsection L to read paragraph 1 for the purposes of this section. If a student is enrolled in a program that awards both a graduate degree and a professional degree, the student shall be considered a professional student if more than 50% of the credit hours in that program count toward the professional degree. We are not looking at subsection M, number 1, but we will look at subsection N, M, number 2, paragraph 2, institutionally determined loan limits. Beginning on July 1, 2026, an institution may limit the total amount of direct, subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans that a student may borrow, and plus loans that a student or a parent on behalf of such student may borrow for a program of study for an academic year, as long as any such limit is applied consistently to all students enrolled in that program of study. An institution that limits the total amount of direct loans for an eligible program under paragraph L to Romanet 1 of this section must document its decision and follow the record retention and examination requirements in 34 CFR 668.24. Romanet 3, an institution must provide clear and conspicuous information describing any program of study that is subject to the loan limitation to current and prospective students, including but not limited to publication in the student's course catalog, publication on an institution's websites, and award notifications. Romanet number 4, prior to taking such action under paragraph L to Romanet 1 of this section, an institution must notify the student who plans to enroll or is enrolled in the program subject to this limitation.
We have several cards up. We're going to start with Andy. After that, we'll go to Ashley, Alex Holt, and then Jenna. But
In addition to
first-
the applause, I never knew what a Romanet was until I met you, Tammy. So if that ever comes up on Jeopardy, I win
So honored.
half of my earnings from the game show question. We go to 4 Romanet 1 under Grad Plus and or Direct Stafford for graduate lending. 4 Romanet 1 under either Grad Plus or Graduate Stafford Direct. Oh boy. It was in regard to has, is not, and has never been a professional student, that language, wherever that might be. It's, I think it was, yeah, that one. So E4 Romanet 1. Okay, so my question is, who is not and has never been a professional student, wouldn't that open the door to programs on their e-app that have said that program is professional, but it's not on the list of 10? Couldn't you argue that that could, they were at one point, so they don't have to, this rule doesn't apply to them? What's so funny?
Alex, if you could use your microphone, please.
You made a very good point, and I used an expletive, and Tammy thought it was very funny.
I'm neutral.
No, I'm neutral.
I'm playing neutral today, just right now. We're going to take that back. Would you be so kind as to repeat that so I have
Yeah.
it?
So let's give an example program. Someone might have a master's degree that leads to professional license. One school on the e-app has it classified under iPads as professional. The other one says master's or graduate. A school could argue with this, hey, we were professional. The language says we can still be a professional because the language is who is not and has the key words and has never been. If that student was a professional on the old e-car definition of professional, which was right now, it's just voluntary. Schools can pick whatever they want. Some schools do it, some schools don't. The schools that did would have an advantage as I read that language.
Can I just add one additional thing, which is that depending on how the professional degree thing goes, then theoretically the schools could have identified themselves as professional during the 1-year transition period as well.
Just a quick point of clarification. That definition of professional student here doesn't defer to the definition in the e-car. And it's always going to be the definition in the reg. So to the extent that, it's opened up a little bit and there's, some a 1-year flexibility or whatnot, that may control, but it's never going to just fall to the e-car. We've defined professional student in regs.
Next, we have Ashley.
I have two questions. We'll take it one at a time. My first question is in regards to ceases to be enrolled language and whether or not that includes approved leave of absences as defined in 668.22. It's a clarifying question.
That's exactly what it means.
Okay.
So 66822 excludes approved leave of absences from withdrawals. So the reason we did that was to account for approved leave of absence.
Great, thank you. Wait, sorry, hold on one second. I apologize. I personally haven't reviewed 668.22, but my colleague says that that provision says that the institution defines it as they see fit.
So if the issue is that it's defined by the institution, it would need to be defined by the institution, would it not? I mean, that's the whole purpose of
And the
it.
institution ultimately determines whether or not the student is enrolled.
And the second question, I was just that our proposal that you haven't had a chance to review yet is relevant to section M2, so I just wanted to point that out.
We can actually answer that. So during our break, we took a look at that.
We don't have to discuss that now if you want to take the rest of the comments or questions.
No, that's totally fine. It's a quick answer. So we can't do anything with your proposal. We understand the concern that you're trying to get at. We read that as you want to cut down on the possibility of, the growth of private lending and student or institutions doing that. We don't have authority either under the OBB or more generally really to foreclose a student borrower's ability to, pursue other lending options. And there's absolutely nothing within the OBB that suggests that we have the right to do that or to lock down on institutions here. Whereas this was designed to allow institutions the ability to, limit growth in programs where students are never going to be able to repay their loans.
Private lending is not Title IV, and we have no jurisdiction over items that are not Title IV. Except for certain things like the, preferred lender list and things like that. But for regulations around private lending at this point, we're not anticipating providing any of those. They're not Title IV programs. They're not Title IV loan programs.
Alex Holt and then Jenna.
So 2 things. Can we just go up to where we started? Where did we start?
The definitions in 102
Oh, not the definitions.
and 203. This part was 203, section 203, 685, 203,
Right,
loan limit.
right. So, yeah, so it applies to there's like a lot of repeating here, so it applies. So, as we get under B2, I just want to point out that I think there still might be some ambiguity here. So if we go to B2, Romanet 4B, you're talking about a program of study at an institution. Um, but then at the bottom it says if the student ceases to be enrolled in the program of study at any point. So um, we don't actually care which way this goes, but this is a little ambiguous because technically a program of study can exist at two institutions. So right now they could cease to be enrolled in a program of study at one institution, but if they immediately enroll in a program of study at another institution, I just want clarification there.
Yeah, I think we need to take that back and look at it a little bit more carefully. Obviously there are places where students are going to transfer, there's
Right.
teach out, stuff like that. So we need to consider how that's going to impact that, um, and determine how we want to do that.
And our position just is that we think it's if the department believes it's statutorily acceptable, we don't have a problem with transfers. We don't think that would be a significant cost to the taxpayer, and we don't know operationally what's easier for the department. We just don't care. We just want clarity.
And we added in the language about withdrawals in accordance with 668
Yeah.
22 to try to add some of that clarity. We wanted to make it more certain what ceases to be enrolled means,
Right.
As well as account for the leave of absence issue. So
Right. Yeah. No. Appreciate it. So the second thing, I was just seeking. I know we had this discussion about the 50% versus 75%. That is my constituency group. Had some reservations about the 50%, and we were just wondering if the department could explain how they decided on 50, because I know you were considering 75 as well.
So I think I can generally explain. We chose 50% just because, we wanted to invite comment on whether or not a higher limit would be proper, and where that line should be drawn. But we thought it improper to try to assign an arbitrary limit because obviously the goal is to not be arbitrary. So 51% being a simple majority is the easiest way to do that. And for the purpose of discussion of the regs, but these are obviously not final regs. We wanted input on what the proper number would be. But in no case did we believe it'd be lower than 50.
Yeah, that makes sense in terms. Go ahead.
We just landed on 50 because we never closed that conversation and we never really heard other than from you that it was 75%. So we kept it at 50, opening it up for session 2.
Got it. So we'll take it back and see if yeah, we'll get back.
Jenna,
So I had a question that I was going to hold until like the right time came because it's a little bit theoretical. But Andy's question actually, I think, raises the issue. So I think normally when you're updating definitional text, one regulation is replacing another regulation. But here, the original definition of program professional degree is in 668.2. The new definition for professional student, which has a sub definition of professional degree, is in 685.102. So there are now two definitions of a professional degree. And so for the purpose of Andy's question, when it says it hasn't been ever, which degree or which definition would apply?
So this is partially the issue with how the statute is constructed, because the statute refers to another section of the CFR as it existed as of that date and time. We're faced with the issue of trying to implement that definition within our regs because that was then incorporated by reference into the statute. We have to determine how that interplays with this statute or this section of regs, and so we have to create something that directly applies here. Just simply cross-referencing isn't enough because as you get pointed out, that section didn't really do much before. So we have to make sure that that works properly here.
The reason that we have put it in the way that we have put it in is because the statute is extremely specific. As of the date of enactment, it is these programs. So therefore, we did not want to just cross-reference if that definition in 668.2 ever changes, it would invalidate the definition here because so if we're just going to cross-reference it and that cross-reference changes, then theoretically anywhere else the cross-reference is would now refer to that new definition. That's not what the bill asked us to do. The bill asked us to do is as of this date. So what we did not define professional degree. We defined what a professional student is, and we listed out the professional degree as applicable to that to the already existing regulatory provisions that mention those 10 programs. So here, we're not redefining a professional degree. We are clarifying that a professional student is one of these 10 items. It's a little different. It's a little very narrow distinction, but because of what the bill asked us to do at this fixed period of time, what was the definition at enactment of that provision? So we put it in specifically here.
But 668.2 still exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it applies to something, presumably.
It does apply to something. It applies within that part, but it kind of doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is by fixing it to a date certain in statute, Congress effectively just imposed that definition in their statute without writing it out. So that now applies to loan limits, which is separate from the issue that 668.2 is addressing. And because they fixed it to a day certain, as Tammy noted, that definition in 668.2 could change, and it would no longer correspond with the definition as it applies to loan limits. So it necessitates creating another definition within loan limits of professional student that references what those professional degrees are as of the date of enactment and our interpretation of what Congress is doing there, rather than tying it to a theoretically floating thing that could change at a later time, because that's definitively not what Congress intended because they used a fixed certain date.
Thank you.
Alex Holt.
So first of all, if Congress is listening, maybe don't refer to a regulation ever again. Not a good idea. 668.2. I understand you said it applies. Is it binding anywhere?
Yeah, I was just doing sort of a quick reference check. There's a few places throughout both Part 600 and in Part 668 where there are references to the term professional degree, so it's needed for those purposes.
Okay, because that makes sense. To clarify why I asked that question is because theoretically, if it's not binding, you could consider deleting it, but since it is binding in those parts, you can't.
The statute specifically referenced this. So we wanted to make sure that we kept our regulatory mandatory text closely aligned with the statute.
Of course.
Jenna.
So moving forward, the definition in 668.2 will continue and for professional degree. And the definition for professional degree in 685.102 will continue.
The definition for professional student will reference a professional degree. It is not the definition of professional degree.
But the language in one
It says what it is, but we're defining professional student. So under professional student, this is what it would be.
Alex Holt.
So we got a little bit of a problem. If you guys define professional student in a certain way, then we could potentially have a situation where professional students are enrolled in schools designated IPEDs that are or are not professional degrees. which I know legally doesn't matter per se, but like, is there a way to align this so that we can, I mean, this is a regulatory discussion, so is there a way to align that definition, since it was stated at the time of enactment? You can theoretically change that definition now to align, can't you?
So what we would prefer you guys do is send us some proposed regulatory text for us to consider for the second session on this. Because theoretically, we're trying to stay away from this professional student definition because we don't have a final definition for us to flesh out yet. So, but if there are things that you see or situations that you would like to submit proposed amendatory text to us, we welcome those by October 10th. And that would really help us. No, I'm serious. I know I sound funny, but I'm saying October 10th because I need to remember it myself. I think if there are no other comment cards up, we could do a pulse check just on the pieces of 2 or 3. We know that this is not a complete pulse check because we are not doing the schedule of reductions. But if you could, if you have, issues with the reg text, we're just trying to gauge where we land with this.
Ashley?
I appreciate the brief response to our proposal, but we would like to discuss it further, so perhaps a caucus is appropriate.
I'm sorry, what?
I said I appreciate the response to our proposal, although it was brief, and we would like to flesh it out a little bit more, so perhaps a caucus is appropriate before we do a pulse check.
I don't think that a caucus is necessary here. Our hands are pretty tied as to what we can and can't do here. We're happy to talk through why we can't, in more detail with you in a sidebar, but I don't think it makes sense to overall delay the committee when our hands are pretty tied.
Well, then I would appreciate a sidebar.
Tammy, could you outline, I know you said there were some exceptions. We're doing a caucus on 685, 203 loan limits. I know you said we are not looking at 203 M1. Could you mention any other exclusion?
The professional student definition was in 102, but I do think the thing that we're taking back would be the who is not and has never been. We don't really want to take a pulse check on that at the moment, seeing as we may or may not have things to consider in that. So that would be probably in quite a bit of it, actually. No, just in this one part. So we would not look at E4 or E4. We could look at 5, 6, and 7, but if we could do everything but E4 and M1.
Okay, I do see another card up. Jenna?
Sorry, I have some questions not related to any of my previous questions. They come from my alternate. Do legacy provisions that state program of study for legacy eligibility mean the student stays enrolled in the same major at the same school? If a student is enrolled in an undeclared major, could they then declare a major and continue receiving funds under the legacy provision?
Program of study. So the exception is very clear what it expects, and that's the same program of study.
Okay, next question. Can Ed confirm that you consider received a direct loan to mean had a first disbursement made, similar to the questions people had about whether made means dispersed? This is a reference to legacy conditions that the student be enrolled in a program of study as of 6/30/2026, and that they have received a direct loan prior to 7/1/26.
So in that case, it goes even further. They have received those funds. It's not only made, dispersed, but they have actually received the funds. So they're receiving funds in the program of study that they're continuing. So the exception is making it crystal clear. The only way to get this is if you are a continuing student and you have received funds as a student in that program and you are continuing as a student in that program. That's what it means. Very specific.
If I understand your question was whether the loan had to be fully dispersed in order to qualify. That was, yeah. I think to Tammy's point, the first disbursement is means has been dispersed.
Last question on Parent Plus aggregate limits. The language states all parents may borrow on behalf of each dependent student for enrollment in an eligible program of study may not exceed 65,000. Does this mean that the aggregate limit is bound to the student and not the parent? If two parents take out a Parent Plus loan, is the $65,000 limit for that dependent student, or is it the aggregate limit for each parent for each dependent?
It is each parent, but I want to look. It's each student of the parent. So if I need to, can I look at this?
Yeah, it's each dependent student per parent. So the limitation applies at the student level, not at the parent. Right, right. Let us look at the reg text real quick.
Two parents with one, all parents may borrow on behalf of each dependent student for the academic year. So that means little Johnny and Susie has a mom and dad borrow, little Johnny and Susie, that's it. They get the maximum for that year, right? All parents for that dependent student. Now, Johnny and Susie has Sarah or Sam as a sibling. Each student, all parents, each student. All parents, each student. So if you got 5 siblings and you want to have all of those kind of plus loans, that's what it's saying. All parents, mom and dad, or just mom, or just dad, or whatever the case may be, each student. So in other words, they're not going to, it's confined to both parents or one parent, however they want to borrow with that one student, each student.
But not both parents. So divorced parents couldn't each take out.
It says all parents, one student. Yes, it is attached to the student.
It's effectively, the limitation is defined by the student. The borrowing ability is tied to the parents.
Okay, it looks like we're ready for the pulse check. And a reminder that we're excluding 203M1 and E4. If I can see thumbs, please. Okay, I have thumbs in the middle for Alex Holt, thumb in the middle for Alex Ritchie. If I can see thumbs back up again, please. Sideways thumb for Jenna, sideways thumb for Faisal, and sideways thumb for Ashley. Everyone else is a thumbs up. And I think we've heard what the issues are for the sideways thumbs already. Does the department have what it needs?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If we could turn our attention to 685-209 and 685-215, that is the loan income-based repayment plans. Or it may be income-driven. Income-driven repayment plans provisions, 682, 215, and 685, 209.
Jeff, did you want to make a comment?
Let me go ahead and drink a sip of tea before I start in. Everybody ready? I'd say thumbs up, but I'm afraid to. All right, we'll start. In 682, 215, income-based repayment plan, we have removed partial financial hardship from paragraph 4, Romanet 1. Romanet 2, we have added a new paragraph 4. Applicable amount means, for the purposes of the IBR plan, 15% of the result obtained by calculating on at least an annual basis the amount by which the borrowers and the borrower's spouses, if applicable, adjusted gross income exceeds 150% of the poverty guideline. I think I have the wrong version. So I want to make sure, is there a new version, team? Did we get this? Oh boy. Okay. Okay. The adjusted gross income of the borrowers. Thank you. So we moved here the adjusted gross income of the borrowers and the borrower's spouse if applicable, and we removed from a suggestion, I believe, from one of the Alex's to clarify where the adjusted income was supposed to be, adjusted gross income was supposed to be. In B, paragraph 1, for the income-based repayment plan, a borrower may elect, we've removed income-based repayment plan only if the borrower has a partial financial hardship and added to have their aggregate monthly payment recalculated to not exceed the applicable amount when the borrower initially enters the repayment. We go down to paragraph 5, except as provided, we have taken out, no longer has a partial financial hardship, and we have replaced when their aggregate monthly payment amount exceeds the applicable amount. We've made the same change in 6. We've made the same change in 7. In paragraph D, we say a borrower's monthly payment amount exceeds the applicable amount and removes no longer has a partial financial hardship. In paragraph E1, we've removed determines whether a borrower, we have inserted recalculates the borrower's aggregate monthly payment to not exceed the applicable amount. We have removed the reference to has a partial financial hardship to qualify for the income-based repayment plan. For the year the borrower elects we have added income-based repayment plan. What we are trying to do here is we heard from you about the IBR and the ICR and this and everything else. And so what we're trying to do is clearly indicate what plan it is without using the acronyms. So in paragraph 2, under annually certify enrollment at 4, after we've removed making a determination that a borrower has a partial financial hardship to qualify for the income-based repayment plan, we've added determining the borrower's aggregate monthly payment. We have removed the reference to has a partial financial hardship and added the words remains on the income-based repayment plan. We switch over to number 3. We remove the reference to who currently has a partial financial hardship. In paragraph 4, under each time a loan holder, we have removed the reference to partial financial hardship and added recalculates the borrower's monthly payment amount. In Romanet 3, information about the borrower's option to request at any time that the loan holder, we've removed the partial financial hardship reference and we've inserted recalculate the monthly payment amount. And throughout the rest of the section, we've removed the reference to a partial financial hardship several times that it appears and added if the loan holder recalculates the borrower's monthly payment amount based on the borrower's request, we've removed recalculate the borrower's monthly payment in accordance with paragraph B1 of this section, and paragraph 5, we've removed who does not currently have a partial financial hardship. In 6, we have currently structured this after E1 Romanet 3 of this section, or if the borrower's payment would exceed the amount the borrower would otherwise pay under the FEL standard repayment plan based on a 10-year repayment period. And then we have removed as a loan holder determines that the borrower's payment is the amount described in paragraph D1 Romanet 1 does not have a partial financial hardship. That was from, I believe, Alex Holt questioning the regulatory cross-reference there. Under a partial financial hardship in Romanet 1, under F paragraph 1, we've removed that. We've removed it in Romanet 2. And then we can take a pulse check on 682-215.
We have some questions first. We go first to Ashley.
Thank you. My first question is on page 10 for people with paper in their hands. It's paragraph 6. Let me know when you're there so I can continue. I'm concerned that while you strike out the PFH requirement since it's no longer applicable, the language used still sort of serves as a gatekeeping function that means the same thing as PFH. Because if, first, I don't really know what a FEL standard repayment, but if we're just using the 10-year repayment term, if a borrower's payment exceeds what it would be in the 10-year, that's essentially the partial financial hardship standard. So I'm not really sure that that accomplishes what you're trying to.
This is when the borrower doesn't provide documentation,
Or,
right?
yeah,
When the
or
borrower
if-
doesn't provide documentation in paragraphs E1 Romanet 1 through E1 Romanet 3 of this section, or if the borrower's payment would exceed the amount the borrower would otherwise pay under the FEL standard repayment plan based on a 10-year repayment period. The borrower would remain on his or her current repayment plan is the last part of that sentence. So the or, we're telling you the conditions for which the borrower would remain on the plan. They don't provide alternate documentation of information or income, excuse me, and their payment would exceed what they would otherwise pay under the FEL standard 10-year plan. We're going to keep them where they are so that they're not put in a worse position.
Give me one moment.
I'd also like to remind you that it's not 10 years standard, it's a 10-year term.
Can you come back to me?
Alex Ritchie.
A couple of items on this conversation that we're directly talking about. I'm curious if the department can clarify why they specify FEL standard repayment plan and just not eliminate the acronym and just say under the standard repayment plan based on a 10-year repayment period.
This is under the FEL section, so I think we just the clarifying the FEL standard plan just to make sure there's no ambiguity because we have we have the standard plan in direct loans, so we would say the direct loan standard plan. So it's just a clarifying.
Yeah, so I mean it's in the FEL part of the regs, so
It is.
I get it. And I just another clarification. Perhaps this might help the constituency group that was just asking questions. The department's position, as I understand it, based on past questions at the table, is that although Congress eliminated partial financial hardship as a requisite to get access to IBR, the effects of partial financial hardship still remain.
Not entirely. Yeah, the language within the partial financial hardship um, part of the statute did change. It clearly removed parts of it, but the aggregate monthly income or payment portion, as that was within partial financial hardship in the HEA, has been carried forward. So we've continued on with that aspect of it where Congress has left that in place, but we've removed the other language around partial financial hardship.
I appreciate that. I think there might be room for some clarifying language. And I understand that we have until October 10th. I might try and beat that by a week. That I think might help clear up some of that those distinctions.
You don't get points for submitting it early, but we do appreciate it.
I'll give you
Ashley,
some points for submitting it early.
I just wanted to confirm that Alex was trying to reiterate probably much more effectively my point that I feel like while you can remove the PFH, if you're still requiring it in practice, I feel like it wasn't really truly eliminated. And I feel like it as written, it's going to cause confusion. And I also don't like including FEL standard repayment plan in there as well. I feel like that also causes confusion. So we can also submit a request or a proposal as well.
I just want to clarify, PFH was removed in its entirety. There are concepts within PFH that were previously there that have carried forward. So, okay.
Sorry, Jacob, can you elaborate on concepts of PFH that remain versus removed?
Insofar as the aggregate monthly income portion or payment portion of the statute, that concept was baked in within the HEA, but it's no longer in the regs. PFH is completely gone. So we had to make all the changes to those sections that previously addressed PFH to carry for the AGI aspect, but there's nothing else in there.
So,
Alex Holt.
so I think generally what's happening, although perhaps not in every single case, is that there's this concept of a cap, right, in IBR that that if your income is too high, you can't pay more than the standard tenure per month. So this is actually a protection usually for the borrower.
Don't have time for lunch.
Ashley,
Okay, well, I would like to discuss this in further detail, and if we don't have time at this moment, then maybe when we reconvene. I also have other comments about the other 685-209 as well. I'm cognizant of the time, so I just wanted to put that out.
We're not discussing 685-209 right now.
Okay,
We're
sorry,
discussing
jumping ahead.
682-215.
Sorry about that.
We do not have time for a caucus right now unless you guys can do it in 10 minutes. We could break for lunch and then have the caucus right after lunch if that's what you want.
Ashley,
I'm amenable to the 10-minute time period or afterwards, whatever you prefer.
Only if it's 10 minutes because we have to huddle on our stuff. I'm not trying to be funny. We have to huddle to get back information to you. So we're going to need that lunch to be able to do that.
Tammy, I'm gonna let you decide.
Oh, no. Because if you let me decide, we're breaking and we'll do it after lunch.
Okay, let's.
Or you can do it, with whomever you want to do it with during.
We can do it after lunch.
so I see no other cards. Would you like to break now for lunch? And
Yes, ma'am.
return at 1 o'clock?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you all very much for a productive morning.